thank you, Mark. Again, really insightful. You talked to me about that stuff before, and I made some upgrades to my office. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. This is what I do. I try to turn my buyers red, but I know
Fantastic.
I'm too red. So I sometimes remember I've got to go blue.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work, but
yeah,
I love that way of how you are just helping that become so visual. And again, so many salespeople, we try to turn that table red, and we try harder and harder and harder. Can you just talk a little bit more about the buyer's response? We're trying so hard, we're being all friendly, and we're doing all these things, and we're red, 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 red. What is a buyer actually going to do when they're seeing that happen?
Well, I'm going to share some really insightful stuff now, because the one things I love the most is when I was blue as the buyer and my seller was red, because sellers were investing all this energy into me, and I would get just best results from that. I would still run my tenders and everything. So as a seller, you can invest all this time and energy into a buyer. A buyer is not going to change their mind. If they can be blue, they're not going to change their mind and become red because you're such a nice person. That's going to be very hard to do. It depends on the industry you're working with. So I worked in the transportation industry for many years, and in the old days, that worked really well. Nowadays, it just doesn't work anymore, especially not with big organizations. If you work with small organizations, it's still possible, to build that relationship. With big organizations, they're expected to run tenders and generate savings. So it's just going to be extremely hard to talk them out of it, unless you have something unique to offer them.
So just again, going back into what you're saying, you said buyers are people.
Yep.
So they're putting on a facade. Actually, they are probably red, but they're very good at playing blue. That's what I've understood from what you're saying. They're going to play blue. It's deliberate. So actually, they may be feeling that stuff, but it's this game. So it's got to be something really deliberate to make them go, actually, brilliant. I can be red too now. Have I read that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because buyers, like they have families and people, and they love their kids. It's not like they're horrible people. They might be professionally. Personally, I don't think they are, right? So they are normal, warm people. They just play the game because that's expected of them, and they think that the best results are gained by being blue in certain situations, right? When it's a leverage or routine market, they think they can get the best results by being blue. Yeah.
So looking at the Krychek matrix, if we say actually it's blue, I'm in that bottom left corner. Okay, I can't make myself unique, but I can just do a really good job of doing what I do. Do that, give them an easy life, they'll leave me alone. Yeah. And actually I could probably even make a little bit more money because they won't be spending that much time and effort on it because they are investing the time deliberately in the red areas. So it's quite good being in that blue sector.
Yeah, it is, but it's hard actually to get in. But once you're in, I would always say, if you're in a routine market, always upsell. Like, if you're selling, copier services, sell paper, office stationery, add stuff. Buyers will love that because they don't want to spend time on it. So a one-stop shop, fantastic in routine. Buyers will love that. Yeah? So, however, they will want to maximize the outcome. They will go shopping. If somebody can offer it like 5 cents cheaper, they'll put you aside. So do you want? I'm mentioning in the chat, if you want to be red, you need to become unique. The other strategy could be, I want to be the most cost competitive organization there is. Then you will always win tenders. But you just have to accept the fact that you're going to be leveraged, all the time. You're going to be blue all the time. You're going to be leveraged. But then, if you're being really cost competitive, you win in those tenders and auctions anyway. That's fine as well. That's also an option. But you just have to expect that there's going to be tenders and auctions being run all the time.
Okay, so I'm keeping an eye on chat. I don't want to monopolize all the questions. So let's just think about something that Alex was saying about, 60%, we know this thing, 60% of the decision is made. If you're responding to an RFP, you've probably got that 10% chance of winning that if you're not involved. Yeah. What can people do to get involved earlier? How can I get, right at the very beginning? What kind of things, what kind of advice could you give for that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing, and I don't think we have 5 hours to talk about all these topics, but one of the things I didn't include in this chat, but actually is something that I do talk about, is what is the likelihood to change for buyers? when buyers run RFPs or tenders or run auctions, are they actually going to change? Are they interested in changing, or are they just benchmarking, just seeing what's out there on the market? And there's different levels of change. So sometimes it's like it's a corporate policy, we just need to do it. Our company expects us to run tenders, but if you look at historical data, did they actually really change, change suppliers? That's how you can see whether there's actually appetite for change. And it goes all the way up to like, from a, it's a company policy to I'm just going to benchmark to I'm running a tender and I'm actually going toward business to I have to change because I'm really disappointed with my current suppliers. Those are the 4 stages that buyers will go through, but you need to find out which one of those stages they're in, because if you're trying to convince a buyer to change to you, but they're absolutely not interested, they just need to do it from a corporate policy perspective, there's no point in spending time on that. We had examples as well in the organization I worked in. I'll not be too specific about it, but where suppliers knew we had no reason to, we were not going to change our suppliers because we didn't have the resources internally to facilitate that change. Once suppliers knew, they could just ask any price they wanted. Yeah? It was kind of a bottleneck market because we were bottlenecked in terms of our resources, and they could ask any price. So as a buyer, I would always recommend always make changes, because it gives the impression that you can change and therefore you can stay in a blue market. From a seller's perspective, really look at if you're participating in the same RFP 4 years in a row and you've never won any business, something isn't working. Is there really appetite for change? And what I would do, I would then, in that case, never connect with these buyers in a competitive process. In the tender process, you always connect with them outside the process. So talk to them 6 months before they actually run these kind of RFPs, because that's the time when their guard is low. You don't have any commercial, a real commercial incentive. It's really about let's connect, let's talk, let's find out about what's happening. So that's one area I would do. Talk to them really before the event. But secondly, I would also try to connect with some people in the internal organization. A buyer is always some kind of gatekeeper in an organization. So they will say in tenders, you can only talk to me. You cannot talk to my internal stakeholders, blah, 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 because they know these people are commercially less sensitive about things. So that's why they're keeping you away from that. But through your network, I know you probably know people left and right within the organization. So try finding out, what is the risk appetite, or what is the appetite for change with these suppliers, with these customers.
Sure, that's why I was smiling, because Alex has just said, oh, we're seeing these Gartner numbers, and we've seen them, haven't we, over the last couple of years, go from sort of 5 to 6 to 8 to 11, maybe 20, and the buyers are going, nope, 5 years ago it was 1, 2 years ago it was 1, today it's 1, next year it's going to be 1. It's me. Don't talk to anyone else. Yeah, because it suits them better, because they can play blue. I know if you talk to some of my guys, they're so red. They're so red. You'll get involved in that.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. An entire organization, the organization behind the buyer, everyone is red. Sales, marketing, HR, finance, IT, they all want to work together in partnership. The only person playing blue is the buyer, and that's the gatekeeper. I know it sucks, but that's reality. And buyers are aware of that the entire organization is red. So they're free, they're telling information, they're telling you stuff, and they know they want to, they don't want to shield off the organization from the supplier. Actually, there is one story, that's this horror story that every buyer knows. There's a situation where a buyer goes into a meeting, and the story I heard was it was a technical discussion, a machine or something that was going to be bought. The buyer took an internal customer, a technician, with him to the meeting. This is the horror story that goes, every buyer will hear that, and that's why they get really, really afraid. Just this one horror story. You go into a meeting, and then the buyer is giving this supplier a hard time. Yeah, your machine is too expensive, and it's blah blah blah, just to get prices down. And then this engineer looks at the buyer and then says, "What are you doing? They're the only ones who can actually provide this machine. What are you trying to do here?" And that's a horror story for a buyer, because once a supplier knows they're the only one, they can just ask any price, and then as a buyer you've lost all your power, leverage, and everything. And that's a horror story. And because that horror story exists, buyers are very reluctant to bring their internal customers into meetings, because they know they are not as commercially sensitive as buyers are. So yeah, that's because the entire organization is red, a buyer is blue. They're careful. They're really careful with that.
Yeah, and I guess David Nicholson's just popped into chat there. Challenge the business needs, seek to monetize. Yeah, so buyers don't really necessarily understand this, particularly, it sounds like they might be in IT sales. It's get these people, get them on board. This is why we need to change. This is the stuff that needs to happen. You've got red people who can see the business need and saying to them, hey, you've got to do this stuff.
Yeah,
I think. No, sorry if I'm paraphrasing too much on that, David, but I'm guessing that's what you're.
No, it's
and Mark's going, yeah, no, we don't like that.
No, but it's a very valid point David makes. Absolutely true. I mean, I was still raised, by a traditional buyer, somebody that valued relationships. So I've been raised differently than the modern buyer, I would say. So I knew exactly what I was buying. So when I was buying logistics in the first 4 years of my career, I knew exactly what I was buying. I sometimes even knew better than some of my internal stakeholders because my boss told me, you need to know what you're buying because otherwise you can't buy it well. And he said, you go out there, you go to suppliers, you look at their operations, you talk to them, you visit them, you talk into them, you do all that stuff. So I spent a lot of days just on the road talking to suppliers, factories, and everyone to understand what was going on. Nowadays, buyers need to buy, 100 different items. And IT, you mentioned IT, Dave, it's a fantastic example. They need to buy, how many software services. They have no clue what they're buying, and they just repeat a process because they don't know what they're doing. And therefore, buyers are often making mistakes in terms of these decision-making processes. They need their internal stakeholders to align, but they present themselves as the one gatekeeper, but they don't know what they're actually buying. I think that's a real risk with modern buyers. They don't know what they're buying, but because they don't have time actually to invest into understanding what they need to buy and how much they need to buy. I think combination is actually devastating for them. Yeah.
So we've got another question coming in here, which is, should I be structuring my emails as well as my meetings with a view to this red or blue thing that's going on?
Yes, definitely. So I think it's first is about analyzing, your buyer. Are they blue or red? So what is their interest? But if your buyer is blue and you're approaching red, which feels like the natural thing to do as a salesperson, you're just going to have accept that they're blue. They're going to be blue, and they will have. So you need to change that. So I would if I would send emails to so if you're working with a red buyer, fine, red email, and you can make the tone quite red. But if you're working really with a blue buyer, which is the hard part, definitely a different approach. Yeah, so try to get them to invite some internal stakeholders into the meeting. Yeah, they are naturally red. So saying, right, I think it would be good if the operational people could be there as well to understand your needs better. Get them in, because that's the kind of people you can build relationships with. And you have to bear in mind that when eventually a decision is made, it's never the buyer alone. I know the buyer is the gatekeeper, but if the internal stakeholder says, I don't agree to this solution, it's not going to happen. Because a buyer doesn't eventually decide that by himself or herself. It's a business decision. So internal stakeholders have power as well in that negotiation. So the key advice would be, look how the informal power lines are running in the organization. Who is powerful, who can influence the buyers in this decision-making process, and try to connect with them. Yeah, they're going to be more red than the buyer is going to be, and that's your potential entry ticket.
So then we're into some, the sales skills of mapping the decision-making unit, working out who's who do you know, what do you know about them?
Exactly.
Who do we know of but don't really know about them? Haven't got the relationship. How can we do that? How can we build that? How can we get those introductions? How can we manage it? How can we work around them? Again, hopefully I'm paraphrasing properly there, David, properly there.
We once said we had one supplier in the old days in our logistics area, and they were really good at that. So they built extremely red connections with the entire organization, finance, IT, operations, everyone. So here I was just by myself, the blue buyer coming in and said, I think we should change supplier. It was almost, like revolution in our offices. Like, you can't change it. They're perfect. We love them. You're not going to change them. All the service we get and blah, 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 blah. It made my life as a buyer really hard. So I think that's, if I reverse the thinking from the other side of the table, that's exactly what you should do. Build strong relationships with everyone, not just the buyer, but everyone in the organization.
Brilliant. Oh, this is. I could talk about this, but we could both talk about this for a long time. I'm just going to give it one extra little pause if there's any other questions or any other comments you want to make. David, I hope I've done your comments justification. I've interpreted them correctly and trying to get Mark to expand on that. It doesn't look as though we've got any extra. Good, thank you.
Well done, Fred.
Yeah. So in that case, what I propose is, you've shared again so much stuff. You're giving us so much to think about, you guys. I'm so pleased. And hopefully people are now, they've got matrices and they're plotting where their offers are. And it could be that they're blue in some cases, red in others. It depends the relationship. And so again, it's about that conscious competence, isn't it? It's being deliberate, it's being thoughtful, it's planning. It's not just carrying on doing the same thing we always do. That's what's going to make us better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Any other parting words then? Any other gems? It's not often I can try and squeeze everything out of a bio that's possible. I've enjoyed the role reversal.
For free, even.
Tell us some more.
Rare occasion. Yeah?
It is.